Well, good morning, afternoon, and evening for those online. This is Dr. Demartini, and welcome to our webinar today. It's transforming setbacks into comebacks. We're attempting to do what we attempted to do last week. We ran into technical glitches last time, and so thank you for being understanding and patient coming back on. We're glad to have you back. I see people are starting to come in. We've got people from Ireland and from the Netherlands and New Zealand and Dallas, and they're coming in from all over the place. Cape Town, Johannesburg, Mumbai. I was just in Mumbai just a few days ago, in fact. Canada, San Jose, California, UK, I think Wales. We have people, we've had I think about 8,000 people sign up, so I don't know how many will actually be on, but they're coming in from Kenya. Again, all over the world, Perth. Anyway, first of all, Trinidad. First of all, thank you for being with me. Our topic, as I said, is transforming setbacks into comebacks. I will be basically doing a little intro at the very beginning, and then I'll be doing content. And then at the end, I'll make an offer and let you know about upcoming opportunities that are available to you. So you want to stay tuned for that, because there's a great opportunity that's going to come at the end. I see there's some people from, they're coming in faster than I can see. New Jersey, France, South Africa again, Brighton, Los Angeles. So everyone has setbacks in their life, perceptually. And I think that they can occur in any of the 7 primary areas of life. We could have intellectual setbacks. I have a gentleman that had to take a test 3 times to get his license. That's a setback to some people. We could have a financial setback where we can have the markets go backwards, or we thought we were going to be able to save and invest, and we had costs that were unexpected. These are setbacks. We have business setbacks. We'd have a hope to grow our business, and we've had things come up that we didn't expect that slowed down our business growth. We've also had relationship setbacks where we've had things were flowing really well, and then all of a sudden we hit a real obstacle in our relationship dynamics, or possibly a change in relationships. Those can be setbacks. Or it could be with children. Could have setbacks with some of the children dynamics that we face. We can also have setbacks with our social climbing and our social networking. I've seen people all of a sudden have something happen in their life, and all of a sudden people rejected them and shut down on them. And that can be a setback as far as the growth in social power. We can have physical setbacks, health issues. I've got a hoarse voice today, laryngitis. I wouldn't call it a setback so much, but I call it my sexy voice. Hopefully that's not too much of a hindrance to you today. But I've had a little bit of a raspy laryngitis this morning. We can also have inspirational things where we're not feeling inspired and we're losing our clarity of vision. Some people can have that a moment and have setbacks. So you can have a setback in any of the 7 areas of life. And I'm sure that as people would write in on the setbacks they've had, they could fall into one of those categories easily. So I'm going to go around and address each of those. First thing I'm going to say is that every setback that we face can be altered by 3 things: our perceptions, our decisions, and our actions. Those are only 3 things we have control over in life. And so we can change our perception of the event that we call a setback. We can change the decisions of what we decide to do, and then we can change our actions around it. And all 3 of those we have control over. We may not have control over what has happened, but we have control of our perception, decisions, and actions around it. That's why we're never a victim of history. We're a master of destiny. Once we understand those 3 things, we have control over. So no matter what happens to you, you have the ability to change how it is in your mind. And I teach a course called the Breakthrough Experience. I've done it 1,071 times. And I've seen people come in with that program with all kinds of setbacks. And they have basically been resentful to people. They've had challenges almost in any of those areas that I mentioned. And one of the things I do is I give them a new set of questions to ask, so they become conscious of things they were not conscious of, and balance out perceptions that they thought were in the way, and turn the same experience into something on the way. And so the first thing, because we have change in perceptions, is that no matter what happens, if we're seeing it as a setback, it's because we're choosing to see the downsides, not the upsides. And I'm not trying to be a positive thinker, because you know I'm not a promoter of positive thinking. I'm a promoter of balanced thinking. Because believe it or not, a setback can also be something we're infatuated with. We could have a setback because, I'll give you an example. I had a gentleman who his girlfriend dumped him, and he was highly infatuated with her, which is part of the reason why she probably dumped him. He felt he was the underdog, and she felt she was empowered, and she felt she could do better than that. And because of his infatuation, he felt, because she's left him, now his life has ended. I mean, he was very infatuated with her and thought, oh my God, I can't function anymore. And so he was infatuated, and he needed to see the downsides of being with her. And I worked with her, or him, pardon me, and I stacked up the downsides. So it's not always that you got to find the upsides to what's going on. Sometimes finding the downsides of something that you just think you lost. Remember, I said in many presentations I've done, there are two forms of stress in life. The stress of perceiving that you've lost something that you're seeking, or perception that you've gained something you're trying to avoid. And so changing your perceptions could be either one of those. If you can find the downsides to the things that you're infatuated with, you can release the stresses and have the setback dissolve. Because all of a sudden, if you're infatuated with somebody and you find the downsides to her, you're no longer infatuated, you're neutral. And then if she leaves you, you're not burdened anymore. It's not a setback, it's an opportunity. But at the same time, if you're resentful to somebody and you're having this event come in your life and you need to see the upsides, otherwise it's running you. So I'm not a positive thinker in this case. If you're on a downside and you're perceiving more setbacks than drawbacks, or more setbacks than upsides, then you may need to come up with the upsides, the positive. But if you're actually infatuated with somebody, you may need to see the downsides. So dissolving setbacks is not about positive thinking, because some of them do need positive thinking, some need negative thinking. So I just want to make a statement that going and balancing out the equation is what liberates you. Anything that you're infatuated with occupies space and time in your mind and runs you. And you need the downsides to set you free. And anything you resent, that you see the downsides of without the upsides, you need to see the upsides too, to set you free. So it depends on what the setback is. If you've lost something you're infatuated with, you may need to see the downside of the person that you're attached to and the upside of them being gone. At the same time, if you're resentful to somebody, you may need to see the upside of why they're coming around you and the drawback if they were to go away. And if you go and take those two sides and balance out the equation, there's nothing there except an event that you're now grateful for. A perfectly balanced mind is a grateful mind. So I'm a firm believer in asking whatever question equilibrates the mind and allows the person to see both sides of the event. So that could be, again, about relationships. It could be money. I've had a person that has lost money, and they've had a big setback economically. They thought they had paid their taxes, and they got hit with a big tax bill, for instance, and all of a sudden they had less money than they thought. And they thought, well, I need to find the benefits of now losing the money, or the drawbacks of having that money if I had kept the money and didn't have it taken. If I neutralize that from both sides, I'm now adaptable. Adaptability comes from a balanced mind. You're not adaptable if you're highly infatuated, you fear the loss of it. You're not highly adaptable if you're resentful to something and fear the gain of it. You're in anxiousness and you're in fear. You're only set free when you have a balanced mind. And that's what I do in the breakthrough experience. The Demartini method is designed for that. It's a series of questions that equilibrate the mind, that liberate you from the bondage and baggage of emotions that weigh you down, which we label setbacks, and liberates us so we can be free and resilient and adaptable to whatever's happening. See, we have to go through and we can gain and lose things, and resilience and adaptability is the ability to have something come and go. Resilience occurs if you have a perfectly balanced mind and something is gone, taken from you. If it's a perfect balanced mind, you're not feeling a loss. But if you're highly infatuated with it and it's taken from you, you're devastated. If you're highly resentful and it comes into your life, you're highly stressed. But if it's neutral and something comes in your life or goes away from your life, you're freed. So a perfectly neutral mind is what liberates people from the stresses and the setbacks. A setback is nothing but an imbalanced mind. So in the breakthrough experience, I had people that have had setbacks, financial setbacks, and I asked them, so let's say that your house costs are way more than you expected. They've raised the interest rate. You had more cost on maintenance, more cost on having to buy things to fill the house with furniture and all this other stuff. And now you're resenting that, and you're feeling you're having a setback because you can't get ahead, you're not saving your money and this kind of thing. So what you can do is go in and find out what's the benefit of having that situation and what would be the drawback of it being the way you fantasize. I always say depression is a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy that you're addicted to. And you're thinking that, well, if it was the way I fantasize, life would have been better. And sometimes the setbacks we have in life are not even setbacks. They're comparisons of fantasies that we're addicted to. And as long as we're holding on to a fantasy about how life's supposed to be, then what it is going to be feeling like some sort of setback or challenge. So I'm a firm believer in balancing out the mind, as you know. And I think that the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. And the most quality questions you can get are the ones that bring balance to the mind. And how are you going to have a balanced physiology without a balanced mind? It's not happening. People say, I've got an illness. I've had people with illnesses. I had a lady the other day when I was in India that said, I had this illness. She had the symptoms and what might be the benefit of it. And first I said, she said, I have this illness. How do I get rid of it? And I said, what's the benefit you're getting out of it? And she said, well, there's no benefit to my illness. I said, no, there's a benefit to it. No one's going to continue to do something unless there's an upside to it. And we went through and we asked her that question, and we got about 6 or 7 answers. It didn't take many, where she started to see, well, maybe this is actually helping her get what she wants. She wanted to get out of a job she didn't want to be in, and her sickness is giving her a reason not to be in it and giving her time to think about the next step in her life. And she's manifesting the symptoms in order to make that change that she's wanting to do. And so sometimes we think that these are setbacks are actually opportunities. Their body's doing something in a way that we didn't see initially. And I'm a firm believer that once we balance out the mind, we don't even see a setback. All we see it as an opportunity. We find the hidden order in our apparent chaos, and we're actually now grateful for what happens. And I always say that anything we're not grateful for, somehow we've got a skewed view of. If we balance out our mind, we have a lot of gratitude. A perfectly balanced mind is grateful. I've proven that in the breakthrough experience on thousands of people. When I ask them a series of questions in the Demartini method and we balance it, there's nothing but gratitude and love. And they see the hidden order, and they don't have a problem. They thought they had a problem. The problem was an imbalanced thinking, imbalanced perception. And by asking the question, what's the upside if you're down? And what's the downside if you're up? It balances it out and liberates you. And then you realize there's nothing there except thank you. So if you're infatuated with something, and if you ask what's the downsides to that thing you're infatuated with, and what would be the upsides of not having it, and balance that, your anxiety about losing it goes down, and the setback of losing it goes down. And if you're resentful to something, and you find the upsides of what you're resenting and the downsides of if it was to be gone, you can balance it out, because you realize that no matter what's going on in your life, a master is able to turn whatever's happening into opportunity. And so it's just about the questions, and you change the perception of those by asking the right questions, because questions help you see unconscious information. And then what happens the second you change your perception, your decisions of what to do with it change, and your actions change. And if you have prioritized actions that are inspired, that are according to your highest value, you have the most resilience. One very, very efficient question, because as I said, the questions you ask in life makes a difference in life. One very powerful question is, how is whatever I'm experiencing right now, how is it helping me fulfill what I value most? How does it help me fulfill what's highest on my value? How does it help me fulfill my mission, my purpose in life, what my inspired vision is? If you ask that question, no matter what's going on, and hold yourself accountable to ask and answer that question, you'd be surprised that you'll see things on the way, not in the way. I found that's the most meaningful question you could probably pull out of your head, is how is whatever I'm experiencing today helping me fulfill my mission? I think that's a great question. And people don't ask that question. They say, well, how is this, this thing that's happening to me, it sucks. I don't want this. But if you ask, how is it helping me? You may not see it at first, but if you hold yourself accountable to look and you discover what that is, you realize that this thing that's a setback wasn't a setback. In fact, I don't think there was. When I look back at my life, you can have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process by looking back and finally seeing how things served you. Or you can have the wisdom of the ages without the aging process by looking right now and looking how it serves you. And the only difference is the one, you're waiting and running your story and being a victim over a period of time. And the other is asking the question and seeing the blessings and the upsides of that event or the downsides in some event. I had a lovely man in Los Angeles the other day that his girlfriend, as I said, left him. And he was devastated by it because he was highly infatuated. And I said, well, let's just take for a second. If all of a sudden she had stayed with you, what were the downsides? And he goes, wow, the downsides if she stayed with us, it distracted me. She was definitely distracting. And I was finding myself doing stuff that I don't normally do to be with her. And I was not getting what I really wanted to get done. And I said, what's another downside? That if she stayed there, if she was there and hadn't left, well, I would have ended up spending a hell of a lot more income. And I just started asking some questions in there and asking what would be the downside if she stayed and what was the blessing that she moved on. And he says, well, I closed a big deal. The moment she left, I closed this big deal. I said, was that some sort of confirmation that maybe that was, you were just infatuated and blind to the downsides? He goes, I think you nailed it. And I see this very commonly. This is a very common thing that goes on in people's lives. The same thing in health. People will say, well, this is devastating to me. Today, for instance, I got a raspy voice, okay? But I see it, the benefit side is that I've got a sexy voice. It's all the way I look at it. And if I can see it in that fashion, I can use it to my advantage. And if I ask myself, if I didn't have this voice, what would be the drawback? Well, it allows me to have to focus more attentively on my speech to make sure it's clear and articulate. But it's about asking the questions that equilibrate the mind. You cannot have a stress and equilibrated mind. Because stress is the perception of polarization. When we're living in our highest values and we're more objective and we embrace both challenge and support in our pursuit of what we feel is our purpose in life, we have way more resilience and we don't have setbacks. We're more resilient. We're flexible. We don't see gains or losses. We live in a world of transformation. And I've had people come up to me and say, well, in the breaks experience, I've had, a guy that said, my mother left me when I was young. And that was a setback because I was abandoned. I go, okay. So first of all, have you ever counted all the famous celebrities and people that started out that way? He says, no. I said, let's go look online and find out how many people started out as orphans and abandoned by their mother. And we came up with this huge list of super celebrity status individuals that started out that way. I said, well, you're in that category. And his therapist had basically had him thinking, well, because he was abandoned, he has certain possible psychological weaknesses that are going to occur in his life because of this. People that have that, here's the stats. And I'm going, that's all bullshit. I said, that doesn't have to be that way. That's just because you chose and people chose to be victims. But what's the benefit of your mother leaving? He goes, well, I don't know. Well, let's look. First of all, what did you think you missed by her being gone? What did you think you missed? Well, this and this and this. I said, who provided those things? And all of a sudden he goes, oh, we found 3 people that provided those 3 things. I said, what else did you think is missing? And we found people that are doing that. I said, what's the benefit of those people providing it instead of your mom? And he goes, well, there's more opportunities. And my mom would never give me those opportunities. I said, so are you sure that this thing is a terrible thing, that your mom has abandoned you? Or are you sure it's not just a gift and you were set for it and she gave you an opportunity in your life? And he goes, wow, you have a way of asking questions, make me see things differently. I've been sitting there running this story about how I've been abandoned most of my life and I've never stopped and looked at how it served me. I said, well, that's crazy not to see how things are on the way and keep them focused on in the way. So I basically helped him see that that's just a gift. It's not a setback. The setback was purely a choice of perceptions. And if a person changes their perceptions, they don't have a setback. Like I said, the greatest question as to how specifically is whatever I'm experiencing, whether supportive or challenging, whether things infatuated or resentful, how specifically is it helping me fulfill my mission, my purpose, my highest value, what's most meaningful and inspiring, and what I'm dedicated in life. If you ask that question, even the setbacks, I had a guy that he had a situation where his house was taken away from him. He wasn't paying his bills, and he lost his house. And he went into a bankruptcy, and he couldn't afford his house. He bought the house at the peak. He wasn't able to make the payments because he thought he was. He had to lose his house, and he was devastated. And I said, so how long you had this house? He said, I've had this for 2.5 years, and I've been just stressed. I mean, it's been unbelievable stressful paying these bills. I said, is there a part of you that didn't want to have to pay these bills, and you wanted out of this trap? He said, yeah. Did you get that done? He goes, I did. I said, are you now interested in possibly renting a smaller place and more effective while the market's still ridiculously high? You bought at the peak of the market. Wouldn't it be wiser to just rent it temporarily until the bottom of the market is coming in? He said, yeah. I said, can you see that this so-called setback is actually a gift? You got out of an overpriced system that you would have taken 10 years to get your equity out of. You've now got it structured in such a way that you could go and rent out a place without having to worry about it. You can lower the cost. You can start saving and accumulating some cash flow. You can learn not to get enamored and fantasizing about buying a house at the peak of the market when the prices were ridiculously high. And right now you can wait patiently, and you could come out with actually a money-making house instead of actually a money-losing house. And he goes, you're right. But he says, I've affected my credit. I said, well, then let's get your credit back in operation. If all of a sudden you're saving money again and you're paying less on your bills and you're getting your house in order, you can go get your credit back in order. You got to realize that the banking system, they put you in good credit and bad credit. It's not the end of the world. It's just a banking strategy to make sure that they're getting the most interest out of you. It's interesting. People go, I want to be able to get a credit card so I can build up credit, which means the bank is not going to give you credit unless they make money out of you. They're not going to give you a good credit rating unless they're making money out of you. And if they show you by giving you credit card bills and they give you a minimum payment and you pay that and they make the most money out of it, they'll give you bigger credit card bills and say you can now raise your limit because you paid your credit card off. You think that's a good thing to have all that credit, and that's got value, but it's not the end of the world just because a bank gives you a good standing of credit, unless you want to get dependent on a bank. And there's many ways of getting what you want in life without having to go use money from a bank. There's many ways of getting things. I haven't dealt with banks other than money goes in and goes out of the bank and goes into investments for years. So I'm just saying that don't let something like that be a setback. It could be the greatest thing that ever happened to you. It made you savvy about your money, made you not live beyond your means. It made sure that you're saving and investing money instead of just putting it all into a house, which is actually a lifestyle instead of there's no asset building in a house unless you downgrade somewhere down the line. So it's actually helping you manage money and think about what's really priority in your life. Somehow people think, well, I got to get a house, but that's not necessarily the wisest use of your money. Sometimes wiser to go put your money into assets. But this is just an example of somebody that takes the challenge and sees a setback. It turned out to be a great opportunity for him. And he didn't realize, when he got through, and we finally got him into a smaller place and paid rent, and he's saving away money again, he felt at ease. And he says, I feel like I'm not working for a friggin' house and paying off a bank. I said, you're working for yourself again. He says, that's worth everything. I was devastated by the idea of a bankruptcy, but I realized that that's only in the opinions of people in a bank. No one really gives a shit about it, except a bank. And if you're not having to borrow money from a bank, whoop-de-doo. It's not the end of the world. So we turned that setback into an opportunity. And I've had people, like I said, who've had setbacks in relationships, setbacks in money, setbacks in health, that are actually turned into great opportunities if we just ask the right question. And most of the things I said, there's two basic stresses. The stress of losing that which you seek, that's a setback, or having to deal with that which you're trying to avoid, and that's a setback. All the setbacks you're going to face are one of those two things, and those are purely because of an infatuation with something or a resentful to something, and those you have control over. In the breakthrough experience that I teach every week just about, I have people that are infatuated with things and resentful to things, and we make them ask new sets of questions, balance it out. The emotions of the gain and loss of those things are no longer there. They're back into resilience, adaptable. They're back into seeing things in a grateful manner, And it had nothing to do with anything about what was out there, everything to do with your perception. Now, you can also take different actions because of those perceptions. Like I said, this gentleman went out and bought a new or rented a new house instead of bought a house. You buy at the top of the market, it can be very stressful to have a house. You buy at the bottom of the market, it can be very rewarding to buy a house if you buy it depending on the cycle. But you can actually buy a house and then want to have to move in 2 years and then buy at the top of the market, and then you can't move. You can't move because you're going to have a loss of equity and you're going to have to pay the bank information. So buying a house, sometimes your bean counters tell you to buy a house. That's not necessarily the smartest thing to do. You need to run the numbers and really think this through. Make sure it's really in priority to do. Also, you can have things with your finances themselves. You can be having a setback in financial markets. I've seen people gamble with various commodities or currencies or possibly leveraged options or contract for differences or whatever, and they've gone out and done incredible leverages or IPOs, and they gamble with their money, and they've had setbacks with their money. And they think, they're foolish enough to gamble without having the liquidity to gamble with. I tell people to save before you invest, before you speculate. People go out and right off the bat and speculate. What's the problem with that is then they think, now if it makes money, they think, oh my God, I can make money easy now. And then they're not willing to be patient to build wealth. And I'm a firm believer in being patient and strategic about building wealth. But sometimes people do that. And then when the market crashes the other direction and they thought they had all this money, they didn't know that they really didn't have what they thought they had. They had a bubble. And I tell people that the real value of a market is the mean, the average fluctuation that it goes above and below it. It's the deviation from that can mislead us. When it's above the mean, we can think we have something we don't. And when it goes below the mean, we can think we don't have something we do. And both of those false positives and false negative kind of responses can cause us great devastation psychologically, because we can actually think, oh my God, I've just lost a bunch of money that you really didn't have. So I always run my expectations based on a mean. And if it's above the mean, I don't get elated about it because I really just think of it as really the mean. And if it goes below it, I don't think as much because I'm not deviating it from the top above the mean. I'm deviating it from below the mean or from the mean. And so I don't see it as a devastation. So if you have reasonable understanding about the markets, then the ups and downs of the markets, as long as you have cash reserves and as long as you basically understand the mean, the probability of having setbacks in that area is less. But that's a combination of perception, a combination of expectation, a combination of the action steps you take. I learned a long time ago that when the market was up way above the market, that's not really what the value of that market is. I got to look at what the real mean of that market is. What's the average fluctuation? And that tells me at least a better idea of what that mean is. Don't give me an exact figure, but it's a better. And as a result of it, then my expectations are more reasonable. And then if all of a sudden I'm having a loss, I don't feel devastated. I don't feel like I had a setback. I just realize it's a normal volatility. And if I don't sell that stock or whatever the market is, I haven't lost a thing. I lost if I sell it. If I didn't lose anything or didn't sell anything, it's just a fluctuation. So a lot of times people have this gamble. I had a gentleman about a year and a half ago. Yeah, it was a year and a half ago. And they bought a bunch of Bitcoins and it went into a frenzy. And they thought, oh my God, I'm going to be, a billionaire very shortly. And it went up to about 1,900 for a Bitcoin. And then it dropped down to 8 and then 9 and 8 and then 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3. And they had a setback, they thought. Well, the reality is that they bought it above that. And so they went to half price. And while it was up, they could handle the highs, but it went down. They were devastated by the lows. And they sold out because they couldn't handle the lows. And they gambled and they speculated. And right now it's doing the same thing. It's speculating way up above and it's climbing up again because of all the frenzy that's going around it. And that thing can go up and down. And if you don't understand what the average mean is and you don't put discretionary income in there, then you run the risk of that. So you have to learn from those experiences how to use your perceptions to say, how to use it to your greatest advantage. And you also have to stop and look at what your next action is. Are you going to keep doing the same thing, expecting different results? Are you going to finally learn to buy a quality, investment, not a speculation? Something that has true intrinsic value that you can measure by some means, and you got a probability in your favor. If you do that, then you're not setting yourself up for the setbacks. And these so-called challenges that you're facing are really opportunities for learning. But as I said earlier, that if we ask ourselves how specifically is whatever's happening in our life helping us fulfill our values, we're automatically, because anytime we get things linked to our highest values, we have the greatest resilience. And we see things as feedback, not setbacks. Feedbacks is when you can say thank you for what's happening, and setbacks are when you can say screw you. You know, so I'm a firm believer. Now, I've had many events in my life that I thought were challenging. I had a fun thing happen many years ago. This is about 36 years ago now. I got my accountant that I hired. This is right when I first opened up my practice, my first year. I had an accountant take a $70,000 loan that I got from a bank and classify it as $70,000 worth of income. So my income, I was supposed to have paid taxes on that, but I actually borrowed it. So it's actually supposed to reduce my taxes. But he had it as an income. He put it in the wrong little file. Well, I got audited because I didn't pay my taxes. And so I had the auditor come in there, and at first I didn't know what happened. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was sitting there going, and I had this auditor from the IRS come into my office, and we went through all the paperwork and figured out what the hell was wrong. And they owed me money. They owed me $18,000, which is not a lot of money, but I was actually thinking that I was about to have to pay unnecessary money. And at the same time, once we got it all straightened out, and I fired that accountant, and I got the accountant I have today, who's been a lovely gentleman with me for all these years, 36 years. And he's very, bottom line, he knows his stuff, and he keeps me on track with that. But that was a devastating thing, I thought, a setback. But that turned out to be money in my pocket. It helped me get my financial house way more in order. It made me friends with a person from the IRS. I ended up selling them some of my products that I was selling, some audio cassette tapes in those days. They came to my talk, turned into be, they were dumbfounded that they owed me money now, which I got back based on not having to pay the next quarter. So it's quite interesting that the setback turned out to be, very stressful initially because I was ignorant. I was blinded. And I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I became more aware. And every time I become more aware, I always say the more knowledge we have, the less emotional we are. And when we're less emotional, we're more focused. And we're more focused and we have more resilience. Objective data resolves subjective bias. And subjective bias is where most of our crazies are, our setbacks are. There's skewed perceptions that are imbalanced. When you're infatuated with somebody, you have a skewed subjective bias. You're blind to the downsides. When you're resentful, you're blind to the upsides. So if you have a skewed view and you're biased in your perception, you're going to add stress to your life, and you're going to end up having more setbacks and fantasies, which are the cause of some of these setbacks. Because a lot of times the setbacks are fantasies that we're comparing what's happening to that we think it should be happening. But if you ask, how's whatever's happening helping me get what I want in life, you don't have that issue. You're grateful. Anything you can't say thank you for is baggage. Anything you can say thank you for is fuel. And so going and taking the time to go through and look for both sides of an event. And what's interesting is you go and take whatever you think is happening that's terrible and devastating and find out how that serves you. Take the worst case scenario and in fact, okay, the worst case scenario, how's that going to serve me? When people in the media, celebrities, for instance, they get bombarded and devastated by media coverage, and people are basically, attacking them. I'll use an example of Michael Jackson with his the children issue, or Harvey Weinstein with his sexual harassments or something. There's no doubt that those are stressful situations, primarily because you got the perception of downsides or perceptions of upsides lost or perceptions of downsides gained. But if you go in there and you find out, okay, how do we use it to our advantage? I was watching a video on Lance Armstrong, and it was a video that more recent, not while he was in the crazies, going through the removal of all his Olympic, or what do we call the bicycling contest winnings or whatever. He got all those stripped away, all his medals stripped away. And he said on the video, he says, this has been one of the greatest things that ever happened in my life. I've been set free from a distorted view about myself and a distorted view about life, and from the internal conflict of the internal lies that I've had. He says, I actually have a fresh start. I'm now grounded. I'm now focused on what I can do to be of service, onto helping other people, and less on myself. It was about myself. I had to be the number one. It was all about me. And he said that this whole event is a gift. He said, I didn't see it initially because I was devastated by it and affected my health. I said, but I look back now and I can see the blessings of it. But the only reason, if I had sat with him, or if he'd come to breakthrough on that week that all this went down, or the month that it went down, and he would have just gone through all the crazies, we could have sat him and helped him sort through and see those blessings as they went on. And by the way, when you actually see the blessings of what's going on, or the downsides of things you're infatuated and balance out the mind, things around you change. There's a quantum entangled effect that it changes around you. You know, you really can change the world around you by changing your perception of the world around you. And I've seen this over and over again. I've had people in fact, I was just in Delhi, India, just a few days ago. And I had a lady that had come to the breakthrough experience in Florida. And she's a lovely Indian woman. And she was saying that it's changed her relationship with her family, her mom. It's changed her relationship with her daughter. It's changed her relationship with her husband. I mean, it's just changed her relationship, because she says, I had expectations based on my own values. I was projecting onto the world, and I was expecting the world to live in my values. And I was creating my setbacks and my anger and my frustrations over and over again, because no one was ever living up to my expectations. And now that I've calmed that, and I'm starting to see people for who they are and expecting to live according to their own values, not my values, all the things that I thought were setbacks are actually normal behaviors. And I now see that, wow, I'm grateful because my expectation changed. A lot of setbacks are because of false expectations. You know, expectations of other people to live in your values, expectations of people to be one-sided. They're supposed to be nice, never mean, kind, never cruel. Or expectations of them to be one-sided and live in your values. Or expectations of you to be one-sided. Expectations of you to be living outside your values in somebody else's values, which happens when you're infatuated with people. Imagine this. You're having an infatuation with somebody. You're minimizing you. You're exaggerating them. You're trying to live in their values. You can't sustain it. You start resenting them because you want your life back. But now you're infatuated with them. You fear the loss of them. And if they dump you because you're the underdog, then you're devastated because you had a fantasy, but you're actually being set free to live in your own values again and get back on top of the world again and be yourself. If you're infatuated with somebody, you know that's not the person you're going to be with. That's a sign that you don't have the right person as far as a relationship, because you're blind. So if all of a sudden you balance that, you're set free from both of those, a false relationship that has been a fantasy and you living in somebody else's values, which is not sustainable. So both those setbacks are actually liberators, because you're no longer having to be in something you're not. But we set up fantasies and expectations to set ourselves up for these so-called setbacks. The same thing, we have people that I had a guy that basically went out and did some trading and made a lot of money in a short period of time doing some trading. And then he had this expectation that will go on forever, that I'm going to make those type of returns forever. And then all of a sudden, when he didn't get those returns, in fact, those returns were eroded by a decline in the market. Then he was devastated because he had a false expectation of what he was going to generate. Prior to making that extra income and fast, he was more patient. But once he got money quick, he wasn't patient anymore, and then he was upset and angry, and he felt like he had a setback, when actually it was just a market doing its normal response. And I was quite amazed at how he couldn't see the obvious. And I pointed it out to him, and he goes, well, that makes sense now. He says, I said, that's the problem with quick money. Getting rich quick can cost you, because what happens is it can make you think that that's the way it should be, always quick. And then when it's slow and it's methodical, then you're not appreciative. And then you feel like you're having a setback because it's not as fast as you once when you had it fast. And that's why gambling can get a very high, a dopamine high, and then you can be devastated when it's not matching what you want or you have a setback. And that's because of the high that you have and the blindness by that infatuation. So I'm a firm believer in balancing out the mind, as you hear. And I could go over cases. In my own life, I've had relationship setbacks, right? I've had a relationship where all of a sudden I was going down this pathway in the relationship, and all of a sudden the person I was with realized that they didn't want to be with a guy that was traveling all the time. And that was a bit of a setback too, because I kind of had feelings for this person, but then that's not what they wanted. And I totally understand that. But I had to get real about my expectations. It's unrealistic to expect somebody else to live in your values. And if I'm not willing to match their values to some degree, then I at least come to a mutual arrangement where we both can see how each other's values are being met. It's unrealistic. But if we can see that and balance it out, then if I can see how what she's wanting is serves me, and she can see what I'm wanting is serves her, then it's a viable relationship dynamic. But sometimes we both project our values onto each other and expect each other to live in other people's values. And those can be perceived as setbacks. But they're just perceptions. And they're nothing more than that. Socially, you can have it too. I imagine that some of the rejection that some people have, some people could have a setback because somebody that's very close to them in their social life dismissed them, discontinued interacting with them. I've seen it in business also, when all of a sudden a client that's been a good client for many years bails out on them and no longer does business with them and has an income source that came from that, and they're not prepared. I tell people in business that whatever your margins are, don't ever have one client that provides more than that margin as far as business, so you're vulnerable to that one client. And that's what had happened in this case with this one gentleman. He had about a 25% of his business was this one particular client. And then when they dumped him, his margin was 16%. So now he's, 9% in the hole because of a loss of a client. So he had to jump and reactivate a bunch of new clients to get stable again. But in the meantime, it took him 3-4 months to stabilize it. And he was setting himself up. But the reality is that's a mathematical probability you can see up in advance. So his foolishness for not thinking in advance that if he's got a one client that's more than his margin, if that client disappears, that's a vulnerable situation. So you have to make sure you're not being vulnerable out of your own ignorance and then setting yourself up for a setback. You can prevent that by diversifying your client base into nothing more than the percentage of your returns. If you do that, then you don't have this so-called setback. But what that did is it made him, over the next 3 or 4 months, made him diversify his clientele, kept it where they had to pay more up front if they were a higher client. And then the contract had it where if they bailed out on him, that they have to pay for a transition of 3 months. And then he got more courageous in what he asked and requested. And as a result of that, he was not as vulnerable. And he knew that he won't take on clients like that unless he does a deal like that to cover those costs. And that was an upgrade in his business. And he goes, I think back now that's a gift that happened. But the process, it's also preventable. We could have prevented that if we'd just known those ratios and thought those things through. So a lot of our setbacks are because we're not thinking ahead. When we're living in our highest values and we're living congruently in alignment with what we value most, we have the highest probability of living in our executive center where we're foresighting things and thinking things out and thinking off the downsides and preparing and mitigating those risks and those downsides in advance. And that's the difference between a person who's thinking from foresight versus somebody that's living from hindsight. Hindsight is learning through trial and error. Oops, God, I screwed up. I got to learn that. And then, oops, I screwed up again. And those are people who live in setbacks. So people have foresight, prepare in advance, and think about what could go wrong and prepare for it. And they have a lot less stress. They're more balanced in their orientation. In fact, foresight implies balance, objectivity. Objectivity means balanced-minded. So if we go through and we think out what are the worst case scenarios that can occur from our goals, and we're prepared for whatever those are in advance, we're decreasing the probability of having those setbacks, and we're prepared for them. So that's the difference between setting a goal that's really an objective or setting up a fantasy that's not. And then it's going, I don't want to think about the negative and downsides. And then when they smack you, you have a setback because you were unwilling to look in advance for what those things are. But if you actually find out what they are in advance and prepare for them and look at what you could do to reduce the probability of them happening, or if they do happen, how to spin them and use them to your advantage, now you're prepared. So setbacks are feedbacks in that respect. So I'm going through the 7 areas of life here. You could also have health, as I've said. You can have a health setting. I mean, I look at my life when I was 17 years old, I nearly died. And without a doubt, that was a catalyst for meeting Paul Bragg and finding out that maybe I could overcome my learning problems, and started my journey about being a teacher. And I'd have to say that I never got to see Paul Bragg again after the 3 weeks I spent with him. I would love to have seen him. I got to meet his daughter, Patricia, and we spent many hours together. In fact, my daughter, Elena, and Patricia has had a conversation, and it's so inspiring because my daughter is now kind of helping me and taking over what I'm doing, just like Patricia did with Paul. And that's very inspiring to me. But if I would not have met Patricia if I hadn't had that set up and almost died. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't be on this webinar for sure if it wasn't for me and nearly dying when I was 17. So that crisis turned out to be a blessing. And so I can wait and look back 50, 46 years, 47 years later and see it. That's pretty easy to see, although I've seen it really for within a short period of time I saw it. But we don't need the wisdom of the ages with the aging process. We can have the wisdom of the ages without it by asking, what's the upside or what's the downside? If you have this, if you ever had a situation where you had this business transaction and you were all elated about it and it actually hasn't gone through, it's just an opportunity. And you started becoming extrovert about it and, wow, this is happening. You tell everybody about it. It hasn't come through yet. It hasn't actually been closed. And then as you tell people about it and you're all elated about it, it falls apart. And then you're devastated because, oh my God, I just lost the thing I was all elated about. And then you had a setback. I found that if you're really elated about an opportunity, that's a sign you're not ready for it. If you have an emotion about it, that means you're not really psychologically prepared for it. When you have a balanced orientation of it, you're prepared for it. So next time when you get this opportunity, keep your mouth shut. Go and look at what are the ups and downsides. Balance out that perception so you're really prepared for all the responsibilities that you're going to have. And then you will find that you don't have the setbacks that you created because you now have a balanced orientation. I've learned that, I guess you could say 3 or 4 times trying to get that lesson. Now, let me go over to some of the combination of questions here that I've been getting in here. Says Jonathan Ovnat, what was the strychnine caused by? Well, actually, it was caused by the baby woodrose plant, which was a plant that has strychnine, kind of a cyanide combination on the outside of the seeds of this plant. It's an analog of those. And it's been debated about what the concentration is and even a debate on it, but the symptoms that I had were definitely those signs. But that's where it comes from, Hawaiian woodrose. And it has a natural LSD in it, and it also has strychnine on the outside of it because of a pleasure and a pain, I guess you could say. And that's what accumulated in my body. I was eating way too many of those. What are the 2 chemicals activated by infatuation? Well, dopamine and serotonin is part of it. That's from Barbara Erickson. What's interesting, the second we're proud and cocky, our serotonins are up. And our dopamine many times is also up. So those are the 2 most common ones. You could also have enkephalons and endorphins. There's a series of chemistries that are up on that case. It says, Hildy, he was homeless and ate from the land. I was homeless for a while, but I didn't eat from the land until I was about 18. And I studied Hugh Gibbons, and I ate natural foods from the land at 18. That was after I nearly died. But I did eat seaweed, fresh fish that came from a cage we built, lobsters, bananas. I did eat off the land partly when I was in Hawaii. That's true. What is the difference between instant gratification and satisfaction that comes from high values? Well, this is Shravan Singh. The difference between instant gratification is when you want a quick fix and you want something now. I want wealth now. Versus satisfaction comes from highest values, which you're patient to endure. I wanted to be financially independent when I was 28. I didn't get financially independent till nearly 10 years later, 9 years later. But I had to work for it. Now, my financial independence has escalated since. because I kept saving and investing. But it's the patience, methodical patience, that led me to that. And I can't say that everybody does it. Some people go out and build a business and become financially independent very quickly, sell the business within 5 or 10 years. Most people are like myself. They did it over time. And I'm all for that. I think that's actually better, because a lot of times if you get a whole lot of money quick, and then what happens, it's so easy that you won't be patient. And then you're always looking for the next fix, and that can work against you. What to do with memories after a breakup? Well, if you're infatuated with somebody and you're having a breakup and you're feeling devastated, that means you're infatuated with them. The first thing I do is I'd do the Demartini method. Come to the breaks experience. Do the Demartini method on the person that you had a breakup with, and let's crack the infatuation. Because you don't ever have devastation over the loss of somebody you resent when they leave you. You have a celebration. So if you're infatuated with them and they leave you, and they break up with you, now you're devastated. That's because you chose to have them on a pedestal. When you really love somebody, they're free to come and go. When you're infatuated with somebody, you're afraid of them going away. When you're resentful of them, you're afraid of them coming near you. So if you're infatuated or resentful, you're living in fear of them going or coming. If you love somebody, they're free to come and go. And I'm a firm believer in taking the time to learn to love somebody. In the breaks experience, I show you how to love somebody, how to balance out the perception so you're not run by that. Let's see if I can go through this. What is the psychological pattern often found in cervical cancer? Well, there's a number of factors that could be involved in cervical cancer, but from a psychological perspective, you want to look at, is there any shame and guilt associated with sexuality and the expression of sexuality that you're hiding? Is there any part of, because that's the entrance into the uterus, is there any part of you that feels like you've not been nurtured, or you're not feeling like you are fully expressing your femininity? These are things I look for. It doesn't guarantee it, but I'm asking a series of questions that deal with your femininity and your shame and guilt associated with your femininity. I saw a woman that was feeling guilt and shame about having an affair, and she got cervical cancer while she was having the affair. It broke the affair, which is interesting. And it did get resolved, but and I can't guarantee that the affair was the factor, but it happened during that time, and I've seen patterns like that. So I look at what sexual connotations are on that, if those are setbacks. What would be the benefits, according to you, from ecological crisis going on currently? Well, I don't have a specific ecological crisis to know what you're talking about. I don't see ecological crisis. I pardon me for my broader awareness on this. I see an event, I see a challenge, I see a solution. In the 1950s, we used to have advertisements on TV in America where the Hudson River was polluted, and there was just absolute, sudsy pollution, and no fish were dying. The fish were dying in the river, and we thought that was the end of the world, right? We're getting pollution. It was the end of the world. And then we found out that now they're swimming and fishing in the Hudson River again. So we found the problem. We worked towards a solution. Over 2 generations, the solution has been taken care of. And I don't like to see doomsday or zoomsday. I don't like to see optimism or pessimism. I like to see both sides, because every event has both sides. So when you have a crisis, I love what Bucky Fuller used to say, pollution is future solution. When they had the Valdez spill many, many years ago, they thought it was devastating because all these wildlife were being, destroyed by oil. But then we found out after a period of time that the amount of oil seepage from Valdez spill, or oil loss into the ocean, was a small, tiny percent compared to the natural oil leaking that goes on naturally in the environment, regardless of what man does. There's oil leaking on the plant, on the animal, in land and on sea. Go look up oil seepage. And then you found out that when they actually did that, they found out that when they were studying this oil and finding out what it does, they found out there were certain bacteria that could consume that oil. And that bacteria would release a certain chemical compound that was actually giving life and saving lives, and was actually used as part of an antibiotic. And so we thought that was a terrible thing. And then we look back and we go, well, it's actually got upsides to it. So I don't like to see things as black or white. I think that's what gives us our setbacks. I like to see things from a gray perspective. So I don't see ecological crisis. What I see is an event, that we'll find a solution to, and we'll move on, and we'll create a bigger challenge, and we'll find a solution to it, and we'll get a bigger challenge, and we'll find a solution to it. So I'm more of that way. I don't see it as the end of the world by any means. Is one of the if one is afraid of financial independence, surely this is an indication that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. Financial independence, I don't know what the fear is associated with it. That's unstated. I can't imagine having the fear of financial independence. I could have the fear of dealing with family members with expectations on you. I could have fear of opportunists, having to deal with that. The fear of having to make decisions with money, possibly, once you have an abundance of money. I don't know what that is, so I'm not sure what your fear is. If I knew what your fear was, I'd give a better response. But everything has two sides. And so financial independence has a new set of challenges. I'm financially independent, and I have new sets of challenges because of it. People have expectations on it. People can go after you. You know, they can threaten you. They could ransom you. There's all kinds of things that people could do if they know you have wealth. And so there are those types of things. But I would need to know what your fear is. If I could give that, I'd have a better understanding of what that might be. So I can only guess. How can you overcome the setback of a serious health issue? Well, the first thing I do have a serious health issue. I don't know what serious means. Is it life-threatening and you got a week to live, or is that just as devastating you and you're not able to work? I don't know what it means. But the first thing I do is, what are the benefits that I'm getting out of this? Am I getting closer to the family? And am I stopping and prioritizing my life? Am I really giving myself permission to not do a job that I don't really want to do? Is it allowing me to get close to people and let people help me instead of me martyr my life away for other people? Is it making me prioritize what I really want to do with the rest of my life? I would sit down and write down the benefits, because if you come up with the benefits of it, it changes your chemistry, changes your physiology, and it helps you heal. A balanced perspective helps you heal. So if you're devastated by it and you're thinking only the downsides, it's to your advantage to do it. Just like if you're infatuated with something and you're seeing all the upsides, it's wise to find the downsides, because otherwise you're going to be fearing the loss of that person, and that's stressful. And that could be a setback if they leave you. But you got to find out whatever balances out the mind. But I found that I had a lady that was living in pain. She claimed for, 50-something years, 54 years she was in pain. And she claimed that. And I said, what's the benefit of her pain? She goes, there's no benefit of my pain. I said, what's the benefit of your pain? And she couldn't see any. And we finally asked her again and again and again, and she finally dug and she started finding them. And she says, my sister was brighter, more intelligent, more better looking, and more physically fit, and more sports savvy. And I go, okay, so what's the benefit of your pain? She says, the only way I could compete for my parents' attention was to be sick and in pain. And then my parents would give me attention over her because she was always the center of attention. I said, so you've been using that as a strategy to get what you want? She goes, do you think that's possible? And I said, sounds like it. Have you been doing that all these years? She goes, yeah, I've been living in pain all these years. I said, has that allowed you to keep your parents juggling energy with you and worrying about you and giving you attention? And she goes, I guess it has. It's been a strategy I've been using. Now, if you have a chronic pain and it's glial pain, you got to look for the unconscious intentions. If you have an acute exacerbation of pain, it's periodically, you might have some reason for it. You have to rule those things out. But I'd look for the benefits. As much as that does help you heal, whatever the condition is, if you find the upsides to it also, it's going to help you do some healing on it. So I'd start there. How do you know if you have the right partners in your business, and what do you do when you realize you don't? Well, if you don't have the right partners in your business, we'd sit down with them and define why are you making that statement, and look at that and go, okay, if I don't have the right people, what is that based on? The idea that they're hard to manage, they're hard to get along with, the idea that they don't produce, they're not being accountable. What's the criteria you're basing that on? Because you may find out that somebody is extremely productive, but it's hard to get along with. If they're highly productive, even if you didn't get along with them, I'd say that that's not necessarily the person that's not perfect for the team. You need to go through the Demartini method, do the breakthrough experience on that person to appreciate that person and leave them be and let them run the business. But if you think that this person is just their highest values don't match, then you may have to move forward and trade people out and let them know that somehow you've hired them and And that's, you can see that you're not fulfilled and you're not productive, and you measure the stats and you show them the stats, and you show them the stats aren't sufficient, and you give them a reason for moving on. But ultimately, before you hire somebody, the first thing I would do is I'd go make a job description that's clear and find out what the values of the individual are, and find out if they can see how doing the job responsibilities are going to help them fulfill their value. If they can't see it, they're not going to be productive. And you're going to feel like you have the wrong person, not the right person on the bus, as Jim Collins said. So I would go into find out what their values by doing the Demartini method online. And then I would go to the job description and ask how specifically is doing these actions can help you fulfill those values, and see if they're fluent and congruent. And if they are fluent and congruent, you probably have a person that's going to work out. If not, you may have to let them go. And you're not doing them a disservice by letting them go. If you can see that they're not inspired, and you can say, Mrs. Jones, it's obvious that your stats are showing that you're not inspired by it. We need to find you a job and get you a job that's inspiring. But this is obviously not it. And or if it's an issue between you and the person, you can do the Demartini method on it and clear it. Come to breakthrough and let's clear the issue with them, if that's what it is. Because that's not worth necessarily firing somebody over. It's just having emotional. Let's see here. I'm in Sydney, looking forward to, oh, thank you. That's Kieran Robb, says I'll be in Sydney. What is the best way to stop looking back and having it hold you back? Well, anything that you look back in your life you're not grateful for is going to be stored in your subconscious mind, and it's going to hold you back. So you go back there, don't avoid it, go back there and find out how it served you. How is it being used in your life? I'm amazed at how many people just don't take that time to look. How is it helping you in your life? Because if you find that, I do every weekend in the breakthrough experience, I've had people have almost every imaginable thing that people think is a setback, and not one of them are not dissolvable. I can dissolve every one of them. I've not seen a setback that hasn't been turned into something we're thankful for. So if you have a problem getting your setbacks turned into comebacks, come to the breakthrough experience, because I know I can help you there. Absolutely certain. Just got to let me know what that is. Make sure we address that issue. FJ, you have it spot on your wording. Have it on spot on your wording. So-called terminal cancer. Cancer is a universal message to change one's current lifestyle. I always say the cancer is the last-ditch effort to try to get you out of an absolute thinking process into love. Cancer is a regression to a primitive toolkit genetically and epigenetically to initiate a fast-growing kind of a trophoblastic stage embryologically. And if we go back and take out the stresses and get our so-called regulatory, non-regulatory junk DNA back in order by getting our stresses dissolved, amazing things can happen with the cancer. I'm not saying we don't need classical treatments, but we certainly want to supplement the classical treatments, if you're using those, with balancing out your mind and being grateful for what this is offering you. Because sometimes it's trying to get you back into the center. I've had enough people who have had cancer over the years. I was president of the Cancer Prevention Control Association many years ago, and I've seen enough patients with cancers that have remissed them by changing their attitudes and perceptions and diet and lifestyle. So there's no harm in doing those things. It doesn't guarantee that that's going to stop it, but it's certainly no harm in doing what's wise for the physiology. But I think that we have the ability to change our physiology with that approach. How to let go of the past? I should have done this. I could have done this. That. How's the best way to live in the now and not live in the past and the future? Sandy Palmer. Well, in the breakthrough experience, when I take people through the Demartini method, I make them go through with accountability a series of questions that extract out space and time from the mind and help you come present. And at the very end of the program on Saturday night, I'm going to make sure you stay till you complete so you can experience what it is to be present. A perfectly balanced mind brings you into present. As long as you have a skewed, subjectively biased mind, you're going to be living in past and future. So there's a science on that, and it's reproducible, and it's duplicatable, and I teach it every week on how to do it. And if you've not been to Breakthrough, come to Breakthrough. Let me show you how to do it, because it's a powerful tool to use the rest of your life. Once you go away from that program, you've got that tool. You can do it anytime you want. And you can take any situation. I've never seen anything your mortal body can experience that your mortal soul can't love. And it can help you dissolve that. I have to go through your value determination process. This is Sing again. According to your questions, I sometimes feel that we do things more because of instant gratification rather than values. I'm coming to your breakthrough class in Houston. Probably will get your point of view in person. Great. I'm looking forward to that. But just know this, that if you're writing down truly the answers to the questions on the value determination, it will screen out immediate gratification. So you got to just when I'm there with you in breakthrough, I'll make sure of that. Just speak up and let's make sure. I'll be glad to help you with that. It's not that hard. Could you apply the quantum entanglement to what is occurring here through the global engagement via the World Wide Web on my computer? Could you apply quantum entanglement to what is occurring here through this global engagement? I'm not sure exactly what that means. I'm only guessing. But I can say this. Mark Penn wrote a book called Microtrends and showed that for every trend that he found on the internet, there was an opposite trend. And there were microtrends, micro changes in society by small groups. And for every trend, there's an anti-trend. Just like in our mind, for every memory, there's an anti-memory. And every content, there's an anti-content in the mind. And so too, on a larger scale, this seems to be holding. And there's a law that kind of governs it called the law of heuristic escalation. And I believe that that does occur in society. And I explain that in my prophecy program, where I go a whole day on sociology and helping people become greater leaders and knowing how to manage people with these pairs of opposites. But I'm not sure what's being stated here on that question on quantum entanglement, so I wish I could answer better now. There's no resentment, just pair values. I'd like 3 kids. She would like 1. Okay, so this is a gentleman that my wife and I is saying that have a desire for a different number of kids. Well, you have a choice. You could say if she likes 3 and you like 1, or she like 1, maybe you could come to a compromise on 2. Or you say, well, I can go out and have 2 more with another woman, and you can give her an option, and then that might motivate her to have 2, or she might castrate you. But you might want to ask yourself, what's the downsides of having 3 and what's the benefits of having 1? And you might have her, what's the benefits of having 3 and what's the downsides of having 1? You might do the Demartini method on each other for that one issue. And so you can neutralize that. So there's more latitude and flexibility on those 2. If you're really rigid on those numbers, you might want to ask why. Having 3 can be costly. Having 1 can be simple. I think we need 2.11 to have a continuation of population. But I would sit down and negotiate that. Your negotiation skills haven't been probably maximized on that. And just know that you can also say that if you're going to have 3 kids, that you're going to have to pay for part of that. I'm not going to be working for that. You can negotiate that. But also having 3 kids can be I have beautiful 3 kids, and they are one. Elena is helping me do what I'm doing in programs. Breach is also helping me in that, and also doing her fashion. And Daniel's doing video games, and got his own video channel. And so, it's inspiring to see them grow up. There was times when you wanted to choke them, other times you want to hug them. I think that's the benefits and drawbacks of having kids. And it will force you, if you have more kids, it'll just force you to figure out how to be more efficient in business and save more money, and it'll just push you. Challenges are opportunities. How do you turn a vacation into a vocation, as you've said, and how do you lose weight? Well, if you go and find out what it is that you do on your vacation and ask, how's it helping you fulfill your highest values, you'll turn it into more of a vacation. That's one. You can also ask, what is it I would absolutely love to do, and how do I get handsomely paid for it? That's what I've asked most of these years. I'd love to travel the world. How do I get handsomely paid for it? Well, I figured out how to do it because I didn't stop asking until I found it. How do you lose weight? Well, you write down what are the benefits you're getting out of keeping weight on first, so you can at least now become conscious of the unconscious motives of why you keep weight on. Because you don't just keep weight on without a motive. So you got to find out why you're doing it. And that's very revealing. And when you get about 25 tear-jerking reasons why you're keeping weight on, ask, what is the benefit of keeping weight on? You'll come to some deep realizations. You'll then know why you're doing it. because sitting there and trying to override it when you got an unconscious motive is usually futile. Better to have the unconscious motives. How do I stop the shining object syndrome? I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption that a shiny object system is gold or glyphs or something. I have no idea what that means. I'm assuming that maybe gold, buying rings or something of that nature, or buying silver or some sort of anything to do with that. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that term. Pardon my ignorance, the shining object syndrome. But just know that anything that you have an addiction to that you want to keep doing, you obviously have stacked up more associations of advantage over disadvantage. You could go in and start stacking up the disadvantages of doing that and the advantages of doing something alternative. Because if you don't have something that's got more advantages than that, you'll do it. And if you stack up, you must have advantages in your mind of doing it or you wouldn't be doing it. So let's change the ratios of those advantages and disadvantages. And then the next one is, can you really speed read and retain meaningful amount of information? I feel that I've been blessed to do that. I've been speed reading for over 40-something years. And, when I didn't know how to read when I started, but I figured out how to do it. And I don't do it every day. I don't try to push myself to the limit. I did in my 20s and 30s. I did an enormous amount of reading in my 20s and 30s. And I did it a little bit more moderately 40s and 50s. And today I still read a lot. I mean, I'm at 30,370 something books now. So I read a lot. And yes, you can absolutely retain information. What many people do is they confuse what they consciously remember versus what they unconsciously remember. I learned when I was lecturing to a group of dentists one time at age 24 that I didn't know what I knew until I got up and I got asked questions. And then out of the blue, when I got asked questions I didn't expect, I ended up with answers that I didn't know I had. So that gave me a lot of courage to not always have to rely on my conscious knowledge on what I read. And I just devoured and sped read and allowed it to go in. And then when I really needed it, the information came out. So if I didn't need it, I didn't need it. I didn't need to be conscious of it. I found that that was helpful. But I also learned what allowed me to read. And reading anything that is linked to your highest values will retain more. So yes, you can do it. I know people that read enormous amounts and have amazing retention. So it's totally doable. I've been doing it for years. I'll do one more question now. Elizabeth Finney says, Dr. Demartini, at the breakthrough experience to help us discover what we want to do. The answer is yes. On Sunday afternoon, I ask you to write down what your life demonstrates is valuable to you and what your highest values to indicate. And I extract from your love list, which you write on Saturday night and Sunday morning, the things that are impossible for you not to fulfill and the things that you feel is destined. And so I go through a series of criteria to help you identify what that is that you want to dedicate your life to. And many people are looking for some magical thing for it to be, but their life is demonstrating it. So I'm going to make you be accountable like that, because the only reason why we don't know what it is we're comparing ourselves to other people that we think it should be there. And that's what's undermining us from being clear about what our purpose is. So yes, I'm going to address that, and I'll do what I can. If you want some attention on that, I'll definitely give you attention on that. I'm going to do one more, and that's it. I need to get on to it here because I've taken up over an hour of your time here. I'm really good at my skills of treatment, results in patients, clinical concern, but my subject of profession doesn't excite me and get me looking forward to the next day or doing more of it. Whereas the topic of mind and matter keep me stay awake for hours and take a decision whether to continue my profession, Okay. If you're doing some activity in your career that you're not inspired by, before I give it up, I would consider delegating that portion to another profession, another professional. If you love working on mind-body and you want to do research on mind-body with your patients, generate patients and have your develop a mind-body clinic, and you're specializing in mind-body issues. So you're looking forward to doing it and studying it, and delegate all lower priority things to some staff member, or hire other docs to do that other stuff and do mind-body. So either go do what you love and through delegating, or love what you do through linking. How specifically is what you're doing right now helping you get to this next level of mind-body? I was the same way. I was very fascinated by mind-body all the way from professional school and before and after. And I was doing research so I could put that puzzle together. And I wrote a lot about it. So I'm totally in understanding that. I felt like not to understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we're creating what we're doing was not as fulfilling to me. I wanted to educate people on what they could be doing in their own life to help them prevent the problems. So I totally understand that. But you could be asking that and doing that information and delegating lower priority stuff in your clinic and have a fulfilling clinic. So I try to inspire the clinic up before getting rid of it, because you may find out that you're just avoiding some of the parts you could be delegating. And then you find that it's way more inspiring. And you might approach patients from mind-body connections, or allow certain patients to be the percentage of those to keep you satisfied, and then appreciate some of the other patients that are spontaneously coming there that want other care, and link how doing that serves you in your long run, because maybe that's the ones that are giving you the referrals to give you the mind-body ones. You may need both of those to keep your practice moving, but find out how what's happening is on the way, not in the way. Will help that. Well, I've done the questions. I'd love to do more. I can do them all day probably, but I just want to make a comment. I've mentioned the breakthrough experience periodically throughout this presentation. And the reason I mention that is because I do it 43 times a year. I've done it 1,071 times. And it's, without a question, a very significant turning point in people's lives, this program. And I cannot emphasize the significance of what it's done for people's lives. I have had thousands, and I mean literally thousands, of testimonial letters coming into my email box from around the world from that program, of all kind of people that had setbacks and challenges and issues in each of the 7 areas of life, and have transformed their perceptions, decisions, and actions. So I want you to know that you can learn how to take these setbacks at the breakthrough experience and turn them into opportunities. There's nothing your mortal body can experience that your mortal soul can't love. I've had just about every imaginable thing that a person could face. I mean, unbelievable traumas, rapes, incest, deaths in the family, health issues, loss of arms, leg. I mean, I've had just about every imaginable thing that people have. Shootings, paralysis by shootings in the spine. I've yet to see something that can't be turned into thank you. And liberating yourself from those setbacks and coming to a point where you can be thankful. Knowing how to do that is what you're going to get in breakthrough experience. And knowing how to take whatever happens and turning it on the way instead of in the way. And that can be positive or negative. So I'm going to ask whatever it is to balance the mind. The Demartini method, which is being researched right now in a university in Tokyo, is extremely powerful at transforming human perceptions, decisions, and actions. I've had people that have had changes in their perceptions from their breakthrough experience, and their life changed. Their trajectory of their life changed. People that had difficulties receiving money because they had guilt, clearing the guilt and the shame that they had been storing, and the resentment to other people that was holding them back, all of a sudden found out that I have no problem holding on to money now. I'm now manifesting money in my life. I've had people that have also had challenges in their business. They were afraid to delegate, and they did the Demartini method on people that they were afraid to delegate to, and that they did the Demartini method on themselves in the breakthrough experience, and they gave themselves permission to shine. They did the Demartini method on people that looked up to, that they admired, and they end up having a new expanded perception of who they are and the playing field they got to play in. Owning the traits, the greats in the breakthrough experience is extremely powerful. That's opened up doorways. I mean, I've had so many doorways, movie opportunities with celebrities, consult opportunities, meeting with royalty, meeting with people in almost every walk of life that's done something amazing. I know that tool is very valuable. I certainly would not be where I am in my position in my life had I not learned that method. The reason I want people to know that method is because I know there is nothing, I've seen anything like it. There's nothing out there that matches it. And I know people can say, well, it sounds really, like salesy. And I say, well, it's a fact. I ask people at the end of the breakthrough experience, How many of you learned something this weekend and got to experience something this weekend that you haven't had? You could probably go your whole life and never have this happen. And every hand goes up. So I'm pretty certain that what I'm giving you is something very valuable. And I do it every week because of it. And people go, why do you do 26-hour programs on the weekend, every single weekend? And I said, because I can. And because I love the transformation that I watch in people's lives. And I love Saturday night when I watch people break through this stuff. And on Sunday when they actually get a glimpse of what's possible in their lives. And when they own the trades, the greats, to give themselves permission to play a bigger game. So I don't know about you, but if you're wanting to grow and break through limitations and plateaus in any of the areas of life, I'm certain that the breakthrough experience can help you. And if you want to manage your emotions, I'm going to show you in the breakthrough experience how to take pride and shame. And pride is an exaggeration of yourself. Shame is a minimization of yourself. And the magnificence of who you are is the middle. And if you can't get authentic, how are you going to expect anybody else to love you if you're not even willing to be yourself? And so I show you how to dissolve pride and shame. I just show you how to dissolve infatuations and resentments, all of which create stress and lack of resilience, which are labels that we end up calling setbacks. I show you how to take challenges, and we take a challenge that you face, and we just go in and find out the other side to it because it's simply an imbalanced perspective. And I show you how to dissolve it and transform relationships. People have relationships that they're feeling like that there's resentment there, or they got a wall up. 99% of those relationship issues are projections of our values onto other people and expecting others to live in our values. And so when I give you an insight in the whole understanding of values and value determination, a lot of people have ahas. And then when I give them the Demartini method and they do the Demartini method at the breakthrough on their relationship, their heart opens. Or they realize that they've been sitting in a relationship that they've already been wanting to move on from, and they have the courage to do it. I'm not really attached to it, but I know that if there's relationship issues, they can get handled in the breakthrough experience. And I've seen all different types, from affairs to relationships that are resentments to wanting to kill each other, divorce settlements. I mean, I've yet to see something that can't be assisted in that program. And then if you want to clarify vision, your vision, when you're in your executive center, your vision and mission come clear. But if you're sitting in your amygdala and you're living in shoulds, got tos, have tos, musts, pride, shame, infatuation, resentments, and you're basically seeking that which is unavailable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable, you're not going to have clear vision and mission. And the sign of an authentic self is a clear mission and vision. And so if that's what you're interested in, I can help you do that in the breakthrough experience. But that's usually on Sunday when I do that. But we got to clear the baggage, and I'm going to show you how to clear the baggage on Saturday so you know why. Because when the second you clear that baggage and your brain is clear, all of a sudden you have a different insight. And that insight becomes your vision. And your mission, I'm going to explain the difference between mission and passion. People are all over the place talking about passion, foolishly. I mean, everybody's talking about find your passion, bit your passion. But passion means to suffer. If you want to go suffer, go ahead. Go follow people that want to teach you how to be passionate. I'm talking about an inspired mission, something you don't need to be reminded or motivated to do. And that's different than passion. So I'm not here to teach you like everybody else the passion game, because that's any animal's got passion. The human being, the difference between a human being and an animal is the difference between meaning and pleasure versus mission versus passion. So I'm going to show you how to be inspired missionaries and visionaries. And if you'd like to expand your leadership, I'm going to show you how to expand leadership. Because leadership is simply being authentic and living congruently with your highest value and being clear on your vision of what you want to lead. If I ask you what you're planning on leading and you don't know what it is, don't expect to be a leader. So I'm going to show you how to be a leader, and I'm going to show you how to empower all 7 areas of life. When I was 18 years old, I had a dream to be a master of life. And to me, a master is somebody that's empowered in all 7. And that's the breakthrough experience is about how to empower all 7 areas of your life. How to wake up your genius, how to build your business internationally. I set out when I was 18 to literally create original ideas that serve humanity, create a business that was global, create financial independence, create a global family dynamic, social influence. I remember when I was around 20, I wrote down 50 names of people that were celebrities that I wanted to meet. That list has now exceeded 4,000. So I've met some amazing people on the planet that all do global things. And that's because of following the principles in the breakthrough experience and owning the traits of the greats, particularly. I mean, it happens almost every single week now in my life. And empowering all 7 areas. So I also wanted to do social influence. I wanted to have a physical body that was vital, even though I got a little horsey voice today, whoopie-doo. I got a vital body, got more energy than most people at my age. I'm almost 65 and I'm still cranking. And I find that there's no reason why you can't empower all 7 areas of life. So if those are what you're interested in, you want to manage your emotions, and you want to go and expand your game and play a bigger game, there's no way you can spend 26 hours with me and going through the Demartini method and own the traits, the grades, and really learn about your values and get clear about your mission and asking whatever questions you have that we can solve. The questions are open. We'll solve whatever it is. Come. You're going to say thank you. As an incentive to come to the program, I'm going to give you one little incentive, and that is that we're going to give you a 10% discount to help you to take action right now. So you can just sign up right below here. And we're going to give you plus an Inspired Destiny, a video that is an online course that's worth $400, and it's 4 hours of powerful information to prepare you for the breakthrough experience. And what it is all the information on how to live an inspired destiny, be master of your destiny instead of victim of history. And so this way you can get started on it until you get to the breakthrough experience and get in motion towards that objective. And that's a $400 bonus to get you to make a decision to come. Because I know you're going to say thank you once you get there. I've yet to see somebody, I mean, occasionally I get somebody that has a different expectation, and somehow it's that what they had as an expectation was different than what I was offering. And that happens occasionally. But I've been doing this program now for over 30 years. I've taken tens of thousands of people through this process. And I guarantee you'll say thank you, learning what I'm going to teach you in this program. There's no way you can go through this breakthrough experience without having a transformation in your perspective of life. It's not just another seminar. It's an introduction to a new perspective and paradigm of how to live. And I've been working very diligently for 47 years almost on that paradigm. And I'm certain about it. It's solid. The information I'm going to present to you is going to be very solid information that's going to help you break through limitations in your life. And if you want to live in a more empowered life, just come to the breakthrough experience. Sign up today. Take advantage of the opportunity and the offer and the discount and the Inspired Destiny program. And get ready to have an extraordinary weekend. It's going to go by quick. It's going to be intensive. We're going to work very strong hours, long hours. But we're going to have a transformation. You're going to learn something you'll use the rest of your life. And you can't hang out with me for 26 hours without having something happen. So just sign up. You'll say thank you. And I look forward to seeing you there. And thank you for joining me on this webinar. Hopefully that there was some value added to your experience today. Thank you for being online. I wish I had been able to answer even more questions. But thank you for doing that. And thank you for telling other people about the webinars we're doing and the other programs we're doing. I've been blessed as of 2016 to have students in every country in the world now, and it's very inspiring to get out to reach them through these type of webinars. And but even more powerful when they come to the breakthrough experience. That's one of the most inspiring moments in my life is when I get to see people with tears in my eyes, watch people transform their life and have gratitude for things they've never been able to be thankful for and break through limitations. So when you're ready for a breakthrough, come to the breakthrough experience. Sign up now. I'll see you there. Thank you again for attendance today. I look forward to our next webinar. And wherever you are in the world, thank you, and give yourself permission to do something extraordinary on the planet. The real you is extraordinary. So I'll see you at Breakthrough. And thank you again for joining me for this hour and a half we've had together. Thank you so much.